And so, a decade later, this wonderful little satirical comic book strip is relevant yet again. Wait, you're white? Yes. But you're from Africa? Yes. South Africa. As yes indeed, Black Panther is now a white guy, and a proper blonde-haired, blue-eyed white guy at that. Which is pretty damn funny, though. Before everybody gets overly excited, he is obviously being set up to be the villain of the piece. As in the comic book that revealed him, T'Challa has a white son. This son becomes estranged from his father and eventually ends up challenging him for rulership over Wakanda and obviously for the mantle of Black Panther. And he wins. He defeats T'Challa, but he does so via dishonorable means. This is obviously setting up the plotline for White Boy here to fuck everything up, and for T'Challa to need to rise to the occasion and reclaim the mantle and fix what those damned whiteys ruined. So, I wanted instead to talk about the race swap in general a little bit, because there is some interesting things to talk about in one of the culture war's probably oldest battlefields next to feminism in and of itself. Because race swapping has been going on for quite some time, and you know what? There was actually a time when the race swapping wasn't terrible. I bring you Wilson Fisk from the Daredevil movie. Now, that works. As, okay, Wilson Fisk, what is he? He is a massive behemoth of a man, enormous, ridiculously strong, towering over everybody, twice as broad as everyone else, and that is an absolute gosh darn unit right there. I will even happily maintain that this is a better Fisk than the current TV version, although I do love this version too. Don't get me wrong, this also is an excellent Wilson Fisk, but Jesus, the size of that dude. So, and this was basically during the time when they were genuinely looking for the best person for the role that could most accurately and effectively represent it. And if that on occasion meant bending the canon to make a better product, then okay, you can see the argument for it. What you can't see an argument for is what is then turned into, like a Black Valkyrie who ends up as the king of Asgard, or Heimdall being a random black guy as well. Race swaps not for any actual logical reason, but simply just to fill quotas and diversity hires. And they were very clear about that was what they were doing. When all of this began back during the early days of Gamergate, for example, it was very obvious that this was intended as a virtue signal, as the original argument back then was representation. Oh, you can never expect to get, black boys, black people, girls as well, to get into comic books if there aren't any black superhero characters. Obviously, people that would hasten to the defense and go, but there are those. And they go, not popular enough, go away. And the same argument was repeated for gaming. You can't possibly expect women to get into games unless there's more female characters. Or tabletop, don't you want more women in 40k? Well, we're gonna need female space marines, but we got the Sisters of Battle. Shut up, not good enough. And that was a particularly poor argument, even for the time, even for like 2014. Everybody knew this was shit and stupid. And ever since the race swapping argument, and gender swap in the form of female Thor, for example, and a rather famous comic book panel of going, and that's for making feminism sound like a four-letter word. They were driven from bastion to bastion, as there really isn't a good argument for race swapping beyond in the case of a particular character. And the argument that we finally have arrived at now, after retreating for like 11 years, is, okay, fine, but it gives black actors jobs. Shit. Well, I mean, on the one hand, you can't argue against it, at least. It does do that. But that is probably an even worse argument if you have to resort to that kind of charity to employ people. What, there's nothing else they could act in? Why? Why is that the case? And again, this has been going on for quite some time, with there's been entire articles written up and down on this subject so many times, including the, oh, but what if they made Black Panther white? As this was one of the earliest counter-arguments too, back in the day when we, very mistakenly so, thought we were up against an opponent that wanted the best thing. When they go, oh, we just want video games to grow up. Oh, we just want better storytelling. Oh, we just want to make everything better. And we believed them. We said, okay, right, so your position is we need to race swap Thor because that'll make more people interested in the medium, which will be beneficial for the medium. Okay, I don't believe that, but let's flip it on its head. What if we race swap Black Panther? Would that be okay? And immediately the answer is no. It usually requires a couple paragraphs of twisting around to explain it. Usually something like, oh, no. Listen. Being black is innate to this character, okay? He's the leader of an African tribe of hyper-advanced dudes, okay? You gotta do that. You can't avoid it. And besides, why would you take away the little representation that exists? As again, we usually return back to the argument that, one, we need more representation, either that be for literally just employing people, or the original Marvel argument of bringing more people into the setting, and then followed up by the superfluous nature of white characters. And this is also where the whole why can't you make your own comes into the spotlight, as all the way back in 2016, this was talked about, when Marvel and DC writers basically said, we tried making original black characters, we tried making original female characters, but nobody bought the books. Nobody was interested. Even the supposed market audience that was falling over themselves for representation, they just wanted the actual good characters. And since neither DC nor Marvel has been overly capable of establishing any new characters for the last 2-3 decades, that only leaves them with one possibility: to race swap the old ones. And even the left has always been a bit dubious around this. So race swapping, whitewashing, or blackface, various terms they came up with to, oh, you know, that character was far blacker. They've whitewashed them by hiring a white African actor, all the way up to the roots of Disney race swapping as symbols of saviorist white supremacy. Oh yeah, I shit you not. We have arrived at the point, in fact, a couple of years ago, where race swapping a white character to a black one has become an act of white supremacy. Yet again, this is the reason why, back in 2014, Gamergate 1 eventually failed, being unable to truly rally the kind of cultural pushback that would have been required to reverse woke in its early infancy, because none of us understood the depth of the retardation we were facing. Not even close. And now, of course, we've finally arrived at the "but you wouldn't like it if it happened to you" argument again, and it's not persuasive to the left either. See, whereas the argument "you shouldn't do that, it's gonna happen to you" seems persuasive to us, for somebody living in a different galaxy in which the left will never lose cultural power, regardless of all evidence to that apparent fact, you don't need to worry about that. Why should the left worry about losing cultural power and having all of the bad things they've done back to them? Because it's never gonna happen, right? Yeah, that was another argument we made back in 2014. You shouldn't do this because the tools you create, the weapons you forge, will eventually be turned back on you. And they laughed at that. And yet, now, of course, here we are. So, I actually do believe that this is a settled case right now. This, again, is obviously just a setup for a villain character for T'Challa to defeat. It's not Marvel suddenly going like, yes, what if we did have a white Black Panther? I mean, if anything, maybe if they rehabilitate the guy and make him go like, oh, damn, I'm sorry, Dad, I didn't figure this out, you know, I shouldn't have doubted you, can we work together? And making him into a junior Black Panther, then maybe, you know, the white kitty cat, whatever, then perhaps. But this in and of itself is not like a reversal of the race swap nonsense. In fact, I hope we don't get there, because I don't really want to see a white Black Panther. I see no benefit in that whatsoever. It seems like a joke, a meme, a ridiculous notion that is played up more for shock value and humor than for any actual, you know, story sense. So, I don't want us to get there. If anything, I want us to get back to this, where, and I remind you again, we had movies in the past where race and gender swaps, well, not less gender swaps, but race swaps at least happened, and people were usually fine with it because it usually, again, also actually made sense. That is the thing. Everybody understands that a medium needs to be adopted somewhat to a different medium. Making a film, for example, you're not actually going to find a white guy that's like 2 meters broad and also happens to be able to act. That's rare. That's very, very, very rare. And so they go for the best option they've got, and again, this was not a bad one at all. And you've even got examples where you can get good people, like, for example, Heimdall, Idris Elba. I love Idris Elba. I've got nothing against him personally whatsoever, but his role as Heimdall has, like, what, 3 lines or something? He's brought up, like, 2 or 3 times in the entirety of the Thor extended universe. All of the movies, all of them, he's there, like, 3-4 times. That's it. You didn't need a big-name actor to play this role. You needed anyone that looked like Heimdall. That's all you needed. He's not a core pillar character. His entire role is stick, sword, and stone, twist, sword. There you go. You do not need Idris Elba for this. You really don't. And of course, there was also the argument that this was being done by the corporations for attention and outrage. And, you know, in the case of Black Panther, which this is not him, this might be that. Although I am more leaning towards the idea that this is a black author, which is the guy currently writing it, simply setting up the white guy to ritualistically humiliate him. I hope I'm wrong, but that would be a rarity. That would be a rarity indeed. Race swapping. We need to get past this, and once this is finally actually dead, and not just dead, once we get to the point where we can yet again, in another decade's time, look at a race swap and determine that it's actually the best person for the job, actually, the sooner we get back to that point, the better. But, well, hopefully comic book movies will have been dead for about 6 to 7 years at that point, so we can get a fresh start again. But at least for now, White Panther. Do unto others, Left. Do unto others. Please, please take that point. Finally, at long last. One might as well hope for water to turn into fire and vice versa. Until next time, I've been Arch. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you all again soon. Have a good day.